So welcome. We've got a session on 20 questions for reward professionals. I'm delighted to be here with Sarah Jeffries. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. And I've been looking a little bit into your background. I'm going to give you a bit of an introduction, then we're going to go straight into the questions. So I noticed actually that you went to the University of Kent at Canterbury, and so did I. You studied accounting, I studied law, and I'm afraid I studied law quite a few years before you studied accounting. And then you went to Lloyd's of London, and then from Lloyd's you went into consulting. After being in Lloyd's for about 11 years, and then a succession of consulting assignments, and now you're head of consulting at AJ Gallagher on reward. And so, what a perfect person to have in our session 20 questions for reward professionals. And the start point for me is always curiosity about what got you in there in the first place. So, what was it that got you involved in reward in the first place?
Yeah, sure. So obviously you've done your research. I trained as an accountant. I studied accountancy at the University of Kent, as you said. Trained as an accountant, and then fell into a financial and people analyst role at Lloyd's of London within a HR team. So there was no one there at the time. No dedicated resource who was looking after reward. So just kind of fell into a bit of reward with, having some financial and analytical background. So I started to do pay benchmarking, supported implementation of a flex benefits scheme, which in those days was quite an innovative thing to be working on. So quite enjoyed getting involved in those things. And I quite liked the work because it's both numbers and people strategy sort of interwoven together. So I was able to, sit with my head in a spreadsheet some days, but also getting out, seeing the people leaders in the organisation. So it was sort of the perfect role for me, really, with the things that I was interested in.
Yeah, really fascinating. And it's definitely one of those entry points, being good at numbers, accounting is definitely one of those roads that lead to reward. And it's amazing how many people say, having, started with reward, that they kind of fell into it a bit by accident. Now, when you take a couple of steps backwards and you sort of say, all right, a bit of perspective on this, you've now had quite a long and distinguished career in reward. And I'm curious, when you think about when you first started, what looks the same to you now and what looks different, now with all that experience in reward?
Yeah, absolutely. I had to count the years back, but yes, it's over 20 years now that I've been involved in reward. But one of the things quite recently that I've learned is that you can't really get complacent with reward. We've had pretty good economic stability for almost my entire career until very recently. So people in my generation have never really worked through high inflation and the associated high interest rates, that those difficult economic environments that we've been seeing. And actually managing pay in these different economic environments is really important. And being able to react quite quickly to things as well. I think I read somewhere that, most people who used to know how to do this stuff have probably forgotten how to do it because it's been such a long time since we've seen this kind of economic activity. We were seeing organisations giving one-off cost of living payments, focusing pay on those sort of lower paid portions of their people. Looking for practical ways that they could support people. And it really kept us on our toes, trying to support clients through all of that. And having to do it pretty fast paced too. So, in the employment proposition has really widened to beyond just the traditional pay and benefits. And it's much more about that whole EVP. Few people are coin operated. It's really now about sort of selling yourself as an employer and what you're offering in return for someone coming to work for your organization. And this, can come right from the very top as well. What is an organization's compelling story and how does the individual buy into that as well? They're interested in things now like, looking up what the gender pay gap is, how sustainable is an organization, and what do they get in return?
Yeah,
But
it's a
also,
big
sorry, go
change.
on.
And I think, that shift you're describing in a way in the balance of power, shifting towards employees being more demanding and having more power in the relationship is a really interesting shift, together with the economic upheaval that we're not so familiar with compared to the past. Unless, of course, you deal with Argentina, and then you're quite familiar with hyperinflation and stuff like that. So, and I'm also, Sarah, I'm kind of fascinated because in a way you wear three hats. I want to get at all three hats during the course of our 20 questions, because one of the hats you wear, of course, is that you are an advisor. So you advise companies on what might work best for them. Second hat that you wear is you're an experienced reward professional, so you probably have your own ideas, which might not necessarily be exactly the same as what you advise to a company in a particular set of circumstances. And of course, the third hat is that you yourself are an employee. A lot of people think that consultants are bought out the cupboard in the morning, but they're not. They are real people who work for real companies, and they also get paid. So you probably have an opinion about your own pay. And we're going to try and get at all three of those things during the course of our 20 questions. And you touched a little bit on my next one, which is, do you find your work in reward meaningful?
Yeah, great question. I mean, here at Gallagher, we talk a lot about helping people feel differently about work. So that's kind of fundamentally what all of us here at Gallagher are trying to help our clients with. I really enjoy working in reward because it allows me to use data in a really meaningful way to support decision makings within organisations. But it also allows us to be really creative in terms of how we approach reward, work with organisations who really want to stand out, they want to do something different, and to help organisations, reduce their staff turnover as well by helping them develop great reward frameworks is really important to me. And you can actually measure the success of projects in that way. So it ticks a lot of the boxes for me. And I always remember a CEO telling me once that, they started a new job as a CEO, and within the first week of arriving in post, they had to call the family of a member of staff who had, sadly passed away after a battle with cancer. And I remember him saying he was so grateful that the organisation had a life assurance policy in place, and all the other benefits that had supported that family through this difficult time. And that he wouldn't have wanted to make that call if he didn't have some of those things. So yes, it's meaningful, definitely, and there are the broad reasons why. That's one very specific example, but it's all part of the broad what you get in return for working somewhere, isn't
Yeah.
it?
And I guess the other side of the coin is meaningful, but with challenges. And so I'm kind of curious also, what kind of challenges do you face in the work that you do in reward?
Yeah. So being in consulting, which is actually where I've spent the majority of my career now, we get to work with lots of different types of clients, different sizes, industries, ownership structures, etc. Always working across multiple clients, different projects all at once. So it provides a really varied role, but it also brings with it its challenges. It takes a little while to get used to working that way compared to being an in-house reward professional. So, we have to get to know our clients really, really quickly and really, really deeply. Tune in to the cultural aspects too, because that really affects, what reward solutions are going to work within an organisation. And whilst I think, a lot of leaders in organisations do now sort of understand and see how important HR and reward is in helping them to achieve their goals as an organisation. And so there is more investment in it, but it's always difficult, isn't it? For HR and reward leaders to really demonstrate that ROI of investing in some of these really important projects. So, that requires a lot of influencing at senior levels within organisations. So that's always a bit of a challenge for us as well.
Yeah. What you've described so far is very much what I'd call opportunities to make a difference. And I'd really like to focus in a little bit more on that, because you clearly, the way you express this is very much in terms of you enjoying the opportunity to make a difference for your clients. And so tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we talk a lot in my team about, moving organisations and, more importantly, their employees from hygiene to hooked. So, the hygiene element is about getting those basics right, making sure you've got fair, transparent pay systems, good pension plans, those basic things. But then the job, of course, is to help an employer to motivate and reward those employees so that they want to stay with the organisation. So this is where, the compelling incentive plans come in, recognition, career opportunities, etc. So in my mind, if an employer can get those parts right, then they'll ultimately have a more engaged workforce who will stay, for the duration. And I believe that's where we help make a difference, is sort of, moving those people from that kind of, yes, I've got the basic things I need, but what's going to make me really put the discretionary effort in, make me want to stay for longer. So we sort of move into that EVP space. And I love the more strategic work when those opportunities arise. Too often organisations are stuck in those kind of practical reward tasks of, the paid benchmarking, bonus rounds. But it's really the reward strategy and the EVP that I think gives reward people an opportunity to make a real difference. And when you start to see that positive reduction in turnover, for example, or an increase in people being promoted, those interventions have been successful and are saving the organisation money. So you start to be able to demonstrate some of that return on investment.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. We're going to talk in a moment a bit more about the scope, because you've talked quite a bit about integration. That it's not just about reward; it's about other aspects too, and that at Gallagher you have the chance to work across a kind of broader range of engagement. But before we do that, I just want to ask you something which I'm curious about. I mean, you started in reward. We're talking now about your journey in reward. You've come quite a long way. Reward has played a big role in shaping your career path. For whatever reason, you've stuck with it. You haven't decided to go and play a guitar somewhere. So, how big a role has reward played in shaping your career path?
Yeah, so I was very lucky to have had some great leaders who've supported me in my career, been great mentors. But I guess joining Gallagher was the point at which, it really boosted my exposure to a broader range of things. So, at Gallagher, we don't just design bonus and LTIP plans. We now have teams that do communication, that help with engagement, that produce total reward statements, that can help with cultural things, manage flexible benefits plans and such like. So I think that exposure has been really important in terms of, where my career has gone and enabled me to sort of broaden out, into more of that kind of EVP type space. And now I lead a great team of reward professionals who, amaze me every day with their dedication to client projects but also advancing our thinking in the reward space as well. And, I hope I can support them to do some great things with their careers too.
Yeah, it sounds like you've had an interesting journey. And this is, the section of our 20 questions that really focuses on your journey in reward. And I'm going to get, into a few other things in a moment, more around the reward proposition, what you think about that. We're also going to get into your own pay. Now, we're not going to get too detailed about that, no need to worry. But I am going to ask you a few questions about, how you feel about your own reward. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the future of reward, and we're going to end up with a couple of questions in terms of, these are my favorites, the best advice you've received about reward and the best advice you've given about reward. We're going to end with those. But before we get into our second section, which is really around the proposition, got one last question about your journey. Now that you have got this perspective, I'd be really interested in how you see the scope of reward, especially given the comments you've made about integration across a wider field than just pay.
Yeah, now this is a tricky one, isn't it? So, I've already talked about hygiene to hooked, about the importance of having a great EVP, of which reward, of course, is a significant part. Reward is a broad subject area, but for me, it's about what an employee gets in return for showing up at work and doing a good job, ultimately. And this goes beyond the sort of more traditional reward elements of pay, bonus plus benefits. It's about how it's all weaved together and communicated. And it's also about having that compelling story that employees can buy into, and know the part that they play in it. For me, it's about creating that team feeling. Everyone needs to feel part of that team, being recognised, being able to recognise others, to create that team effort, with underlying fairness, of course, at its heart.
Okay, that sounds really good. Well, let's get into a bit more detail then around how that can happen through reward, around the reward proposition itself. A lot of HR organisations, a lot of organisations focus on the idea of top talent, how important that is for the progression of the company and its business. And I'm curious, what aspects of reward would you say are the most important for top talent in an organisation?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier on, few people are coin operated, and truly engaged people are excited about the role, about being given opportunities to be involved in great things. And there are probably two main things I would pull out here. So the first would be enabling career progression pathways that are clear and achievable. Support for any sort of training qualifications are relevant, but that's not the only part of it. And secondly, really well designed incentive plans to keep them motivated and keep them rewarded. And both of these things, they ultimately require that a really good reward framework, which they kind of sit upon. I'm a really great advocate of having a job leveling system, and I don't mean a really complicated job evaluation system, not a black box kind of thing, but what we would call sort of job evaluation light or job leveling. So it's still a factor based analytical model, but one that people will understand, rather than it being that black box. And most clients find that that's a great starting point, when reviewing reward systems, because it provides the basis for almost everything else. So your career progression can sit on top of your job leveling framework, so people can clearly see how they move through the organisation. The bonus eligibility can hook on that as well. So both of the things that I mentioned before that I think are key to keep those top talent, they rely on having this underlying system, and it's important to have transparent and fair systems, and I think that's how you achieve it. A client of ours who we worked with recently, job leveling, he describes it as the sneaky importance of job leveling, because actually, and I love that phrase, because it's true, it really is the fundamental underlying thing that then, how you then incentivize the different groups of people, but you've still got the same sort of fair, transparent framework that sits underneath.
So I guess what you're really saying is that progression and seeing a pathway for progression is pretty important to talented people because they want to get on.
Definitely. Yeah.
I sometimes call this a game of snakes and ladders. That you need to show people where the ladders are and that they're
Yeah.
realistically climbable and they could make progress, and especially if they avoid the snakes. But moving on a little bit to the mighty middle then. So talented people in the organisation, what about the mighty middle? What is it that works for them? Maybe not so interested in progression. What's the thing there then?
Yeah, and you should always aim to have a reward package that is broad, has something for everyone, because people are motivated by different things. This group most likely want stability in their role, a good package of benefits, a little bit of choice, but they still need to understand overall, the give and get, and feel that their contribution is acknowledged. I think recognition arrangements are really important for this group of people. They come into play here, ensuring more of the sort of more everyday type recognition and, thank yous from line managers and from peers. They need to feel valued and they want to perform. They're a bulk of your organisation, and without them, most organisations probably wouldn't be able to operate. So Definitely want them to feel valued, and fairness again throughout everything. As long as things are fair and things are transparent, people will respond well to them, in my view.
So valued, recognised, and fairly rewarded is definitely a good start point for the mighty
Yeah,
middle. And as you say, without the mighty middle actively engaged in making the company successful, the chance of that success is much lower. I think there's no doubt about that. And sometimes my feeling is that they look at people who are labelled as talented, not with total respect, if you see what I mean, because their differentiation isn't always justified by the experience of the mighty middle, let's put it like that.
yeah.
But let's not dwell on that too much. I'm kind of curious just to see, if there's something that, if you had the magic wand and there's something that you could change in the market norm for the reward proposition, what would it be?
We touched earlier about, the expansion of the reward proposition, talked about total reward, and we talk about EVP. And I think the key with getting the right reward proposition is joining all of those pieces together and really looking at the bigger picture. Working on elements in isolation is sometimes necessary when there are tactical interventions needed or time is short. But what I change, I think, is the way that reward is viewed by, sort of business owners, executives and leaders, and the understanding of how reward can really support them in achieving their goals. If you've got a great, holistically designed and considered reward philosophy and reward systems in place that's tailored for your organization, I believe that that's really going to help that organization. And it comes back again to this ROI point that I made earlier on, being able to demonstrate that in a more meaningful way to business leaders. I think it would make our job much easier, if people kind of had that link and that understanding as to how important it is with the achievement of organizational goals.
Yeah, I think that theme of integration, I can hear it coming through quite a few of your views on
Mm.
reward. So I'm going to ask you an integrated combination of two questions. It's really, what do you think people are getting currently right, in organisations about reward generally? And then, of course, the flip side of that coin is, what do you think they're generally getting wrong?
Okay, yeah. So we'll start with what's going right. So we see some really great things that our clients are doing. There's lots of work in the DE&I space. Some organisations are taking, for example, family leave benefits, a really good leap forward with really progressive policies to support parents, whatever the family arrangements or how they got there. Paternity benefits particularly are starting to improve. Carers leave, supporting those with those kind of dual caring responsibilities as well, with the children and the parents coming together. But also, there's a lot of people who are modernising their offering, constantly reviewing it. And I think that those are the people that are more likely to be getting it right. Who wants season ticket loans anymore in these days? They need to be, thinking about what they can offer instead, or adapting those things and just keeping them updated really. And of course, asking employees, what they want to see and what they value, getting that internal perspective on things. So the sort of two-way communication and feedback loop is so important. And I think organisations who are doing that are definitely getting things right for their employees.
And the flip side of the coin, Sarah, what would you say,
Yeah,
companies are still not quite getting right?
yeah. So, there are some really great comprehensive reward packages in place. But where a lot of organisations fall down is, around actually spending time, money, and effort in purposefully communicating those things to people. This came out as one of the top 3 challenges within the Gallagher Benefits Strategy Survey. Most of the people had no predefined benefits communication budget at all. And then the few that did had budgets of, £10,000 or less, which it isn't really a meaningful spend to be able to do proper communication. So people are spending a lot of money on having benefits in place, but not often doing a good job with that communication. And sometimes it's not about having absolutely everything. Think of those, really thick handbooks, 30 pages plus, describing all of the things that people have, that get rolled out each year at annual enrolment. It's not really about that. It's about constantly reviewing and reshaping and creating something that stands out, supports your HR strategy, business culture, and helps you achieve those goals. So, when we're consulting with our clients, we like to focus not just on what's competitive, which is of course always the question, but what will make an organization different, what will help them to stand out. And, we think that they should spend more time and money on those things to support their attraction and retention.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I remember reading some interesting research by Josh Bersin saying that the best return on investment for companies in reward was communication, because what they did was already not well understood. So,
Yeah.
Rather than change things and not communicate them, better to communicate what they already do and try to improve the perception of their people of what was on offer. It kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Now, Sarah, I want to turn to your own pain now. I mentioned to Sarah earlier also that I have a really bad cough, and I'm going to have to take a cough break quite soon.
Okay.
At which point I'm going to turn off my mic, and I'm probably going to fall over to the left-hand side and cough excessively. But that's not now, that's later. And before we get to that, I want to ask you about your own reward package. In particular, I want to start with, what is it that you find the most valuable in your own reward package personally?
Yeah, so, I mentioned earlier on that I trained as an accountant. I've got a financial analyst background. So I'm quite traditional in what I value about my package. Having a really good pension is really important to me. Having healthcare in case we need it, other risk benefits like flex, critical illness. And I'm lucky enough to have a great, what I spend on benefits, what I take in salary. So, that's definitely an important thing to me. And I think I mentioned as well that, early advocate of flexible benefits. So truly believe in that. But also the other one for me within my organisation is having time off to do volunteering work. I love to be able to do that. And I also think it's great when you can do it as a team building exercise. You're contributing to the community, but achieving something as well. And flexible working policies, as well, in this day and age, really, really important for me. I've got a young family, so, it's nice to be able to work flexibly when I need to as well.
Yeah, so a bit of personalization and flexibility goes a long way for you, which sounds really good. Let's get even more creative. Let's sort of say, if you had the ability to design your own bespoke package, how would it be different to what you get now? What would you do then?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I had to think about how I was going to approach this one. But I think I've got license to go big here. So, obviously, everyone wants a competitive salary in place, but more than that, it's a clear policy showing me how my pay is set, how it's progressed, so that I know everything is fair and equitable. And I think, especially with pay transparency legislation coming down the line, that's a really important thing for me, and for me to help my clients with, is to make sure that we're prepared for that sort of pay transparency thing, and that everyone understands how pay is managed in organisations. Then I would make sure I had a really well-designed bonus incentive plan, that line of sight to the goals that will support the organisation with their strategic objectives. And of course, again, that, the communicating regularly on how we're doing against those targets, so that all the employees and I can understand, how my contribution is going to affect how much I get out of that bonus plan at the end of the year, and help everyone feel part of the team, pulling together towards the same outcome. Then back to the career thing. Again, I'm lucky enough to have had a great career and been able to work my way through. But we really need to show people how they can do that. So for me, being able to have that opportunity to see how you can grow within an organisation is really important. And then, of course, the flex benefits comes out again. So I'd like to see really good communication, really good tech around my benefits. Luckily here at Gallagher, we do have a lot of that. But, looking at tax efficient benefits as well. I want to be able to sacrifice, maybe some of my bonus into my pension if I wanted to. And small things like that can make a big difference to some people, depending on their situation. And of course, all those basic benefits are there as well, and plenty of choice, holiday, leave, volunteering, something for everyone. But finally, the other thing for me would be, to be able to contribute to a positive culture of recognition, being able to offer more of that day-to-day recognition to my colleagues and my peers.
Well, that's a really great and comprehensive answer. I like it. I especially like the themes of transparency, because it's a kind of fairness, again, coming out in your comments, and an appreciation for good communication, clear pathways, and
Yeah,
good logic, that you understand the rules and how things are done and what you need
yeah,
to do to get a bonus and how you're progressing along that path as well. All of which makes a lot of good sense to me.
yeah.
Um, let's turn for a moment in terms of what's changed. So this is what you feel now after a lot of experience, after having been a employee for many years. How's that changed? When you think about back on what you were like when you started compared to now, how's your view on the things that you value? Has it changed over time?
Sometimes you need cash, sometimes you don't need cash. So having some flexibility for sort of sacrificing your bonus, reducing your pension down for a while if you can, and taking more money, and then other times being able to put more money into your pension, and those kind of things. But also, access to tools that allow you to see the effect of some of those things as well. Not paying into your bonus, for example, will affect what happens when you want to retire. But the other side, I suppose, for me is I've had 3 children. I was at 2 different employers when I was on my maternity leaves. One of them had great maternity benefits. The other one was only statutory. So at that time, that was really important, to understand, how will I be supported through those kind of things. So it definitely changes, I think, as you move through your career and different times in life as to what is important, which is, why having so much choice is really important. But also, I think, it does come back to that communication thing again. Most of all, it's about being in the know about what you can and you can't do, so you can make those right choices for you at any particular time in your life. And whilst I kind of live and breathe reward and benefits, most people do not. So you really need to point them to the information in the easiest and most digestible way.
Yeah, very interesting. Because I think what you're describing also that flexibility and the opportunity to make some changes is really important for you personally. Together with that knowledge of what is available. But there's something else as well, which I hear in what you're saying, which is an appreciation for a rich diversity of benefits. That you don't have to do the work. Many people think, oh, cash is fine. People make their own choices. But clearly, what you're saying is that when the organisation has things available for you, it saves you a lot of hard work in making your own arrangements, and you can focus on what you're supposed to be doing at work. I guess that's what you're saying. But
Absolutely.
without forcing you to answer that, because I'm curious about what you said, I want you to kind of use that as a bit of a springboard to think about the future of reward, because if there are 3 themes in the future of reward that are going to shape what it's going to look like over the next few years and beyond, what would you say those 3 themes might be?
Yeah, I think obviously DE&I has been around for a little while now, but pay transparency is coming in now. So I think that combination is definitely going to play a major part in how reward is structured, the mechanisms that need to be in place to provide that transparency. Employees look at prospective employers and want to understand how they're doing with those things. The gender pay gap, for example, is already required to be published for those larger organisations, and soon pay transparency will come into play. So, I would advise organisations to be planning for this well ahead of time. get a look at what's in place, undertake an equal pay audit to identify any of those risks and areas of concern, so that you've got time to tackle them, because we're in a unique position that, the EU are going ahead of us, but it's going to come our way. So I would take the opportunity to plan. Your policies for pay and reward need to be up to scratch, because that forms a part of the regulatory requirements. You need to be able to demonstrate that there is a fair mechanism for determining pay, for example. And reward has moved from this one size fits all to flexibility. And I think it will continue to move towards sort of total personalization. So I think this is the second area for me. Digitization and AI will play a part in this. And I think things will move pretty quickly as well. So we need to be thinking about what that means for reward, and the amount of data that will be available to help us to make better data-led decisions. And the third, I think I would have to bring back to that career piece that we've touched on quite a few times in my answers so far. How you motivate, coach, and support people to achieve their potential when the world is changing around them. And in some sectors, career is really well established. In accountancy, for example, the background I came from. But in other sectors, I think there's still work to be done in how you can spell out for people how they can move their career. And it's beyond, just those professional exams. It's mentoring programs, providing broad-ranged opportunities, being able to work on different projects, etc., to sort of build experience. So yeah, I think that's the three that I would pull out.
Yeah, nicely said. Thank you very much. Let's also turn then to reward as a profession. In that vision of the future, which you've outlined very articulately, how will the skills and work activity of reward professionals change? How are they going to keep up with that change? What will be different about what they do you think?
Yeah, I had to think on this one a little bit. So, my team get increasingly involved in broad reward projects. And what we're seeing is more of a crossover into sort of organizational development, culture change, talent management. So, all of these things are intertwined together in a lot of the work that we do. So I think that, the reward teams of the future really need to have that broad-based understanding of HR, but also, a real good understanding of business. And I think, you alluded to earlier on, most people don't choose a career in reward. They kind of fall into it because they've done something else that's kind of touched on it. So, and I think that is what we need. We need business people working in reward who understand, broader business and broader HR, and it helps them, be able to tie back the reward projects to the organisational objectives, and with that piece that I mentioned earlier on about demonstrating that ROI, which keeps coming back into all of the strands of this. We're still going to need those analysts that are going to do all that stuff in the background, but I think as a reward function, it's really important that we're seen as true partners, as we navigate that vision of the future.
Yeah, very interesting. So broadness. I mean, so this expression, as broad as we are deep. That one of the difficulties with reward is that it's very easy to get specialized and stuck in a silo, and you get really deep. But you need to be broad too.
Yeah.
So it's not the easiest thing to give as a career opportunity for reward people. Our structured career path is often less structured than others, even less structured than others. So providing that transparency in that pathway is quite important. So nicely said. Okay, look, we're coming towards the end, and we get towards the end. We get towards engagement. If you've already called this out as a pretty strong theme. And, how would you really want to bring that whole vision of reward to life for employees?
Yeah, so I work across lots of different sectors in my role, different client types, sizes, ownership structures. And of course, this will be different for each and every one of them. But what I would say is that being as open as possible with employees about how reward is managed in your organisation. I think historically, and some organisations just still do this. Everything is behind closed doors. That there's no explanation as to why you get X or Y or Z. Don't leave your people to wonder how things are done around here, how pay is reviewed, how bonuses are calculated. I would definitely recommend letting them understand the processes, because they need to feel like they've been treated fairly, and I don't think you can achieve that unless you're more open about these things. Even if you can't share, the specific numbers or percentages and such like, just the fact that they know that there is a process that is fair, that is being followed, I think will move a long way towards that. Communication, of course, absolutely key. If you can have a portal to make things easy for them to find information that they need, if you're able to have total reward statements available and keep them as live as possible. You can even nowadays, use total reward statements at the point of recruitment, so that when you're trying to attract people, they can log in and actually see what their full package will look like. Because of course, they're inevitably going to be comparing a number of different offers. So I think that's a great idea to try and engage people from that very early point in their experience of your organisation. And if they can see that they're going to get that level of communication before they've even joined, you need to kind of carry that on when they get in.
Yeah, well, Sarah, thank you very much, because it's a very clear vision around transparency, fairness, also respect for the individual, giving flexibility and choice. So thank you for that. Now we get to those last two questions that I mentioned before. The best bit of advice you've ever received about reward, and then after that, the best bit of advice you think you've ever given about reward.
Yeah. So I think what I've learned from various people who've been part of my growth as a reward professional is that there's never one size that fits all. Every organisation is unique and on a unique journey. There's no quick answer to what should be done or in what order. So whenever we're working with clients, we spend a lot of time getting to know that organisation before we offer up any solutions to them. We undertake a really detailed discovery phase, because that what they need will be unique to them. And people spend a lot of time asking us about what others are doing and comparing themselves to others. But this is almost never really the answer. What you need to do is look internally to understand what's the right thing for your organisation, while still taking account of what competitors are doing. So internal and external, that's the best advice I've ever received.
Very good, okay. And in terms of giving advice?
Yeah, so one of the most interesting discussions I have with clients is always about the strategic versus the tactical. It always makes logical sense to me to try to do the strategic stuff first, then get the framework in place, that sort of job leveling piece, and then build your reward package around that. But of course, the reality is very different, and everyone I speak to is at a different place on their organisational and HR journey. So we love supporting clients with reward strategy reviews, building them a roadmap of actions and projects so that they can put that strategy into place in their organisations. But even if they can't do that, my advice is always to have a plan, to think of the tactical and the strategic piece together, but of course work it within the possible of your own circumstances in your own organisation. And of course, any reward elements should always be tied back to the organisation's strategic plan and flow from the HR strategic plan too. So yeah, that nuance between strategic and tactical would be, the advice I would give to people.
Yeah, very good. Well, listeners, I think we're all grateful to Sarah Jeffries from Gallagher sharing her time and her thoughts and her experience with us today. So, Sarah, thank you very much. It's been a very pleasurable experience. So, thanks a lot.
No problem.